We're continuing today with Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th Canto, Chapter 10, the deliverance of Nalakuvara and Manigriva in the form of Jamala Arjun trees.
A devotee therefore does not eat anything that would require slaughterhouses for poor animals. Rather, devotees take prasad of Krishna. Tena tyaktena bhunjithaha. Krishna recommends that one give him patram pushpam phalam toyam, a leaf, a flower, fruit or water. Bhagavad-Gita 9.26. Animal food is never recommended for human beings. Instead, a human being is recommended to take prasad, remnants of food left by Krishna. Yajna shishtashinah santo mucchante sarvakilvishaihi. Bhagavad-Gita 3.13. If one practices eating prasad, even if there is some little sinful activity involved, one becomes free from the result of sinful acts. Purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 10.10.9.
So, Tena Tyaktena Bhunjita, we heard yesterday, mantra 1 of Sri Ishopanishad. Tena Tyaktena means set aside as one's quota, and Bhunjita means one should accept. So that's as much as each living entity should accept, even in the human form, although we have the opportunity to acquire so much, we have to restrict ourselves, because if we take more than what our quota is, we have to suffer later. You overeat one day and then you have to fast the next day. And on this last sentence, what if there is some little sinful activity involved, one becomes free from the results of sinful acts. So that little sinful activity, that includes the vegetarians, because as we described yesterday, even vegetarians, they're taking the life of living entities. But because Krishna gives the quota of the human beings, patram pushpam phalam, we're allowed to utilize those things by offering them to Krishna and then receive them back as prasadam. And then we come free from the results of sinful acts of infringing upon even the vegetables and the fruits.
While living, one may be proud of one's body, thinking oneself a very big man, minister, president, or even demigod. But whatever one may be, after death, this body will turn either into worms, into stool, or into ashes. If one kills poor animals to satisfy the temporary whims of this body, one does not know that he will suffer in his next birth, or such a sinful miscreant must go to hell and suffer the results of his own actions. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.10.10.
So both heaven and hell are within this dark universe that we can't get out of. Even if we elevate ourselves to the position of a big demigod, we're still entrapped here within this prison house. And every single living entity, whether he's a demigod or he's a worm or an amoeba, he is born, he develops, he produces some offspring, he dwindles, and then he dies. And when the body is finished, when the soul leaves the body, there are three things that can happen to that body. Either from within, because our body is also like a universe, and we're just one jiva, one living entity living within that body of ours, in the heart. But there's so many millions and billions of living entities living within the same body. We're just the master of the body, like Lord Brahma. So when we leave, this particular jiva, ourself, leaves the body, from within, the worms eat the body up. Or if the sanskar, the antim sanskar is not performed, and the body is just thrown on the street or neglected somewhere, it turns into the stool of the dogs, the hogs, or other vultures, other animals that might eat that body. Or if the sanskar is performed, then it's given to the fire and the body is turned into ashes. So this body that we take so much special care of can only be the completion of the body, the end of the body, only ends up as either worms, stool, or ashes.
In this verse, the three words krimi vid bhasma are significant. After death, the body may become krimi, which means worms. For if the body is disposed of without cremation, it may be eaten by worms, or it may be eaten by animals like hogs and vultures and be turned into stool. Those who are more civilized burn the dead body, and thus it becomes ashes. Bhasma saudnitam. Yet although the body will be turned into worms, stool or ashes, foolish persons, just to maintain it, commit many sinful activities. This is certainly regrettable. Report to Srimad Bhagavatam 10.10.10.
Now we also hear that if one is in civilized life and the antim sanskar is performed, the body is burned, there's shrad. That means the offering of foodstuffs to the departed soul. Now for the Vaishnavas this isn't required, because these are for people who are aspiring to Pitriloka, and that means where the ancestors live. And they enjoy there for something like 3 generations, and then again they have to come down to the same family and take birth again. So this shrad is simply for karmakandis, people who are interested in elevation and then they have to come down again, so that it's like that. But for the Vaishnavas, because the Vaishnava understands that the soul hopefully has gone back to the spiritual world, for 12 days they don't engage in deity worship, and then they serve the Vaishnavas. First they offer bhoga to the Supreme Lord, and then that bhoga that's offered to the Lord is then offered to the departed soul, this prasadam, and then that plate is given to the animals. And the remainder, the mahaprasadam, is distributed amongst the Vaishnavas. And for those who unfortunately have not followed the principles, don't have family, or are simply neglected, then they're eaten by the animals. And even here in Vrindavan, unfortunately you'll find that some of the poor widows and the beggars that you see living on the streets, who have no family, who have no income, so when they die, because it costs a lot of money to burn a body, if they have no money, then normally they're just thrown into the river where the fish and the turtles eat them, so they also become stool.
The human form of body is actually meant for jivasya tattva jijnasa, enlightenment in knowledge of spiritual values. Therefore, one must seek shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. Tasmat gurum prapadyeta. One must approach a guru. Who is a guru? Shabde parej nishnatam. Srimad Bhagavatam 11.3.21. A guru is one who has full transcendental knowledge. Unless one approaches a spiritual master, one remains in ignorance. Acharyavan Purusho Veda, Chandogya Upanishad 6.14.2. One has full knowledge about life when one is Acharyavan, controlled by the Acharya. Purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 10.10.10.
So we heard 2 days ago, because it was Srivas Pandit's appearance day. Disappearance or appearance? Disappearance day. So he recommended Nimai Pandit to become a Vaishnava and worship the Supreme Lord through the holy name. So Nimai Pandit asked for his blessings. Of course, Nimai Pandit is the Supreme Lord, and Shriman Pandit, he's Narada Muni in Gaura Leela. So even in that Leela, Narada Muni, he was preaching, and who was he preaching to? The Supreme Lord himself. So then Nimai Pandit went to Gaya, and he met his spiritual master Ishwara Puri, who had previously come to Navadvip. so he was already known to Nimai Pandit. He took shelter of his spiritual master, who was the disciple of the great Madhavendra Puri. And then, having received the mantra, the holy mantras, he then was infused with ecstatic love for Krishna. And he came back completely transformed and began the Sankirtan movement. So Acharyavan, one who is controlled by the Acharya, that means he's dedicated his entire life to his spiritual master. And once one accepts Diksha from the Guru, one then becomes the property of the spiritual master. That means the spiritual master gives instructions how we should live our life. When Sanatana Goswami, after he got a terrible disease with oozing sores on his body, he wanted to commit suicide because he didn't want the Lord to embrace him and get his body all dirty. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explained to him that your body doesn't belong to you anymore. You surrendered to me. I'm now the proprietor of your body. So you have to do as I want you to do. He wanted him to write books and to excavate the holy places in Vrindavan. And then he embraced Sanatana Goswami, and the whole disease disappeared at that time. So our Diksha is equally as important. When we take initiation, no longer is there aham mameti. Aham mameti means this is mine, everything belongs to me. Now everything belongs to the Guru, and whatever we do should be in his service.
But when one is conducted by Rajogun and Tamogun, one does not care about anything. Instead, one acts like an ordinary foolish animal, risking his life. Mritya samsara vartmani, Bhagavad-Gita 9.3. And therefore, continuing to go through suffering after suffering. Nate vidu swartha gatim hi Vishnum, Srimad Bhagavatam 7.5.31. Such a foolish person does not know how to elevate himself in this body. Instead, he indulges in sinful activities and goes deeper and deeper into hellish life. Report to Srimad Bhagavatam 10.10.10.
So 2 days back we heard the sloka, Atakshi Krishna Namadi Nagrayam Indriya.
Atah Shri Krishna Namadi Nabhavet Grahyam Indriyehi Sevon Mukhehi Jivvado Swayameva Svaratyadaha.
So in spiritual life, Sevan Mukhe Shri Jivado, that our service begins with our tongue in spiritual life. That means we vibrate and we take prasadam, and that way we become purified by the tongue service. So similarly, degradation also begins with the tongue, because we are what we eat. So if we eat foods in the mode of ignorance, then we develop the mode of ignorance. That includes meat, fish, and eggs, things that are rotten and decomposed. Even prasadam should not be offered if things have been cooked more than 3 hours before the offering. Everything should be freshly offered to the Lord. Although after is prasadam, it doesn't matter what the condition it's in. For instance, Raghunath Das Goswami, he would take the old rice that even the animals wouldn't eat, the cows wouldn't eat, and simply wash it and eat that. If we eat in the mode of passion, then we develop the mode of passion. Passionate foodstuffs, too spicy, too many sweets, like that. And if we eat in the mode of goodness, then we develop the qualities of goodness. So we can choose, either we can eat prasadam, or we can become contaminated with the modes of goodness, passion, or ignorance according to what we eat.
While one is living, whatever the external condition of the body may be, within there is only stool, urine, and various kinds of worms. Thus, being engaged in jealousy and violence to other bodies, materialists cannot understand the ultimate goal of life. And without knowing this goal of life, they generally glide down to a hellish condition. In their next birth, such foolish persons commit all kinds of sinful activities on account of this temporary body, and they are even unable to consider whether this body actually belongs to them. Krishna Book, Chapter 10.
So our karma is developed in the human form. Animals don't reap karma. For instance, when a tiger kills an animal, it's not that he's going to suffer for that killing, because he's just following the laws of nature, and he'll gradually evolve to higher species from the animal. So in this human form of life, we have a choice, because we have enough discrimination, intelligence, to choose whether we want to progress or whether we want to regress. And that's decided in the Shastras. If we perform elevating activities, then we can reach the higher planets, but even from there we'll have to fall down again to the earthly form. So, or if we choose to go to the spiritual world, we can take shelter of the Supreme Lord, and He'll pull us out of this material ocean of suffering. So that's in our hands right now. Sitting here, we can decide, where do we want to go? Do we want to commit sinful activities and fall down again into the lower species and then gradually be elevated? For instance, a monkey, he takes next human form is in the mode of ignorance. A tiger, next human form is in the mode of passion. A cow, next human form is in the mode of goodness. But why all of that suffering unnecessarily? We simply have to follow the instructions of the Lord, take shelter of Him, and then He'll take us out of this dark ignorance within the material universe.
Generally, it is said that the body belongs to the persons who feed the body. One might therefore consider whether this body belongs to one personally or to the master to whom one renders service. The master of slaves claims full right of the bodies to the bodies of the slaves because the master feeds the slaves. It may be questioned then whether the body belongs to father, who is the seed-giving master of this body, or to the mother, who develops the child's body in her womb. Krishna Book, Chapter 10.
Now, as devotees, we would naturally conclude that our body belongs to Krishna, just as we heard that our body now belongs to our Guru, to be used in Krishna's service. But a material body, that belongs to the person who feeds it. So how does a person become a slave? What usually happens is, someone wants to make money, so they go and capture people, and they sell those people in a slave market to make money. And those people then belong to the slave master. And just like an animal, a sheep herder, a cow herder, cowherd boy, whatever, they protect the animals, they feed the animals, and the animals belong to them. It's their responsibility. So slaves also, they belong to the slave master. The slave master believes that these bodies belong to me. I can do whatever I want with them because I feed them and I paid for them. They have no concept of the fact that each human being is an individual with free choice. No, they've been sold to that person. So in the material world, we become slaves as well. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati used to say when he would see a wedding procession go by, king for a day and slave for a lifetime. Because that's what happens in marriage. For one day, you're treated like a king, and then suddenly you're a slave to the family. And at the time of marriage, suddenly you have so many new friends and enemies, simply because of the marriage bond. So we also, because of our relationships and our responsibilities, we become slaves in this world. And to get this liberation, we have to take shelter of the Supreme Lord's service, and then He becomes our master.
Foolish persons are engaged in committing all sorts of sins due to the misconception of identifying the material body with the self. But one should be intelligent enough to understand to whom this body belongs. A foolish person indulges in killing other animals to maintain the body, but he does not consider whether this body belongs to him or to his father or mother or grandfather. Sometimes a grandfather or a father gives his daughter in charity to a person with the view of getting back the daughter's child as a son. Krishna book, chapter 10.
So such activities simply bind one further and further in the material repetition of birth and death. We have to figure out the way out of this samsara. And that means following the varnashram dharma according to our guna and karma, and devoting everything that we do to the Supreme Master Sri Krishna. Whether we're brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprast, or in vanaprast or sannyas ashram, everything we do can be devoted to the Supreme Lord's service. So even in marriage, as grihastha, we can make our home into a temple by worshipping the Lord with all of our family members. What Prabhupada is describing here is sinful activity. How one practically sells his daughter so that he can get a son in return. So all of these incur sinful reaction. We have to be very careful of what our motives are when we enter into different ashram responsibilities. They should always be for the purpose simply of pleasing the Supreme Lord.
The body may also belong to a stronger man who forces it to work for him. Sometimes a slave's body is sold to the master on the basis that the body will belong to the master, and at the end of life the body belongs to the fire because the body is given to the fire and burned to ashes, or the body is thrown into the street to be eaten by dogs and vultures. Krishna book, chapter 10.
Now sometimes, even in the present day, people who are very poor, who don't have any opportunities in India, let's say, they think that if they go somewhere else, the grass is always greener on the other side. So they think if I go to a foreign country and get work there, then I'll be happier, I'll get money, I'll be out of this cage of poverty here in India. But they don't know that when they go to the other country, they're actually being enslaved to work by the people who own them. It's a terrible business. For instance, you'll find many Indians in Mauritius, in South Africa. They thought that they were going to a better life, but they went there and they had to work so hard in the sugarcane fields, in other fields, simply to make a little bit of money just to live. So there was no difference. In fact, their life was even worse because they were treated like slaves. So we have to learn to be satisfied in any condition of life we're in and simply devote our activities to Krishna. And then Krishna, he'll make sure that we get everything according to our quota and we can live very happily. It's not that by changing our condition of life, we're going to be happier.
While alive, does this body belong to its employer, to the self, to the father, the mother, or mother's father? Does it belong to person who takes it away by force, to the slave master who purchases it, or to the sons who burn it in the fire? Or if the body is not burnt, does it belong to dogs that eat it? Among the many possible claimants, who is the rightful claimant? Not to ascertain this, but instead to maintain the body by sinful activities is not good. 10.10.11.
So we should be contemplating this, and now Sukdev Goswami will give the answer in the next sloka. We'll see if that's coming up. You see here, Draupadi was put into that situation. She didn't even know about the gambling match going on. She was in her room, in an unclean condition, and suddenly Dushashan forcibly entered the room and dragged her out by the hair into the assembly, saying that now you're our slave. So what else could she do? Her husbands couldn't protect her, so she took shelter of Govinda, of the Supreme Lord, and Krishna immediately came and protected her. So any condition that we're in, whether we're poverty-stricken, whether we're looking for knowledge, whether we want something from the Lord, everything should be directed towards the Supreme Lord because He's the only one who can protect us and who can give us what we require for maintenance. Excuse me?
Left side picture.
Left side picture are the 4 different types of devotees who surrender to the Lord. Arta, Artarti, Jigyasu, and Jnani. The Arta means a person who's suffering. The Artarti means he wants something from the Lord, some material return from the Lord. The Jigyasu means he's curious about God. And the Jnani means he knows who God is and he purposefully surrenders to Him. That's the 4 types of devotees that Krishna describes in Bhagavad-Gita, surrender to Him. And then there are the pure devotees like Draupadi.
Before committing all kinds of sins to maintain the body, one should understand to whom the body belongs. Ultimately, it is concluded that the body is a product of material nature, and at the end it merges into material nature. Therefore, the conclusion should be that the body belongs to material nature. One should not wrongly think that the body belongs to him. To maintain a false possession, why should one indulge in killing? Why should one kill innocent animals to maintain the body? Krishna Book, Chapter 10. Padmagandha and Pishangaksha are Krishna's pet oxen. Suranga is his pet deer. Dadilobha is his pet monkey. Vyagra and Brahmaraka are Krishna's pet dogs. Kalasvana is his pet swan. Tandavika his pet peacock, and Daksha and Vijakshan his pet parrots.
So we now have a material body made of the 8 gross material elements. And that body here, according to Sukadeva Goswami, belongs to material nature. Because when the soul leaves the body, this body will disintegrate back into the 8 elements. But this body can be spiritualized by engaging in Krishna's service. And that's why the pure devotee's body is not burnt, it's preserved. So Krishna also, in the spiritual world, there's so many varieties of animals and living entities who are eternally in those forms enjoying with Krishna. Krishna has his pets. Now it's become a fashion even to eat dogs and cats. You can buy them. Here still, it's against the law to eat dogs and cats because there are humane societies who don't want to see these particular animals killed. They don't care if the cows are killed, the buffaloes are killed, but they have a lot of affection for dogs and cats. But in other cultures, it's perfectly normal to eat dog meat and cat meat, and all other types of meat also. One time in Africa, they were having a college program, and they made eggplant pakora. Eggplant pakora, you know, and they left the stem out so you could pick it up. So they took it to the program, and they were, after the kirtan and the lecture, they were passing out the prasadam, and one of the people said, "No, I don't like mice." They thought it was mice. So people eat all kinds of things in other cultures. They eat crickets and cockroaches and mice and snakes, and if it crawls, if it moves, they eat it, simply to sustain this sinful body. And they have no concept that they're going to have to suffer for killing these poor innocent creatures, just for their tongue, just for their belly. So this is what Krishna does with animals. They're all his pets. They're all his friends. And here in the material world, according to the culture, they might even be eaten. So we have to elevate ourselves to that spiritual platform where we see all living entities, regardless of the body they have, as parts and parcels of Krishna.
This body, after all, is produced by unmanifested nature and again annihilated and merged in the natural elements. Therefore, it is the common property of everyone. Under the circumstances, who but a rascal claims this property as his own, and while maintaining it commits such sinful activities as killing animals just to satisfy his whims. Unless one is a rascal, one cannot commit such sinful activities. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.10.12.
So this is yet another disciple of Narada Muni. This is Mrigari. Mrigari was an ignorant, sinful hunter who learned from his father to half kill the animals so they would suffer more, because he was the Mrigari, he was the enemy of the animals. So when Narada Muni was walking through a forest, he saw the half-dead animals shivering in pain, and he wanted to find out who was doing such a cruel thing, and he found Mrigari. And Mrigari said, well, this is what my father taught me, because he was a hunter. So then Narada Muni showed him in the sky all the animals that he had killed, and how they were just waiting for him to die so they could attack him and eat his body and cause him the same amount of pain that he caused them. So then in fear, he surrendered to Narada Muni, and Narada Muni gave him instructions how to live as a very simple Vaishnava. And then by chance Narada Muni was coming. He said, let's go see my disciple, he lives here. And as Mrigari was coming, there were some ants on the path, and Mrigari, he wouldn't even cross the ants. He was afraid he would kill one of the ants, so he first brushed them away before he walked to offer his obeisances to his spiritual master. So this is the difference between understanding that we're the body, or that this body belongs to the service of the Lord in the Guru's service.
Atheists do not believe in the existence of soul. Nonetheless, unless one is very cruel, why should one kill animals unnecessarily? The body is a manifestation of a combination of matter. In the beginning it was nothing, but by a combination of matter it has come into existence. Then again, when the combination is dismantled, the body will no longer exist. In the beginning it was nothing, in the end it will be nothing. Why then should one commit sinful activities when it is manifested? It is not possible for anyone to do this unless he is a rascal number 1. Purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 10.10.12.
Of course, for the atheists, atheist, theo means God, and theist means one who is opposed to God. So for them, what is the meaning of sinful and pious? That comes from God. That the definition is in the scriptures. So if they don't accept God, then they also don't accept His laws. They might have some concept of morality, what they think is right and wrong, but God is the one who makes the laws of what's right and what's wrong. So you'll see, in any combination, first there's a little egg mixing with the seed, and in the early stages of development, all the living entities look the same, like little worms. And then according to their karma, they develop different types of bodies, so that they have to enjoy and suffer in those types of bodies. But actually, it's so similar, and it's temporary. Just because of the sinful reactions, they're forced to take different varieties of body. So we should never imagine that we are these bodies. These bodies are the product of our previous pious and sinful activities from our previous life. Now, fortunately, by pious activities, we have a human form on a middle planet, and this is the best opportunity because Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement is going on, and we can engage in chanting Hare Krishna and quickly go back to Godhead.
When a man is infatuated with the false prestige of opulence, he does not care for any moral instructions, but indulges in wine, women, and animal killing. In such circumstances, a poverty-stricken man is often better situated because a poor man thinks of himself in relation to other bodies. A poor man often does not wish to inflict injuries to other bodies because he can understand more readily that when he himself is injured, he feels pain. As such, the great sage Narada considered that because the demigods Nalkuvar and Maligriv were so infatuated by false prestige, they should be put into condition of life devoid of opulence. Krishna Book, Chapter 10.
So this cursing by these saintly devotees, it's not out of anger or jealousy or cruelty, it's actually out of mercy. When they see someone puffed up with material false prestige and opulence, then they give them a poverty-stricken condition so that they can understand the pain of others who they were inflicting pain upon. Now we heard previously that Ravana, he defeated Kuvera and sent him away to the northern region. And then Ravana went on to become a terribly sinful demon. He would rape women, whoever he saw, without any discretion, whether they were wives of saints or virgins, or it didn't matter to him, because he was fearless due to his false prestige and opulence. He even went so far at the influence of his sister Surpanaka to steal Rama's wife Sita and take her away. But because he had previously been cursed that if he ever touches a woman without her permission, his head would be exploded into thousands of pieces. So he couldn't touch Sita. Otherwise he knew that he would be himself killed. So he gave her a certain amount of time for her to decide. After that he was going to eat her, because he also ate humans, Rakshasa. So this is the limit, the furthest limit, Ravana, of this infatuation with false prestige and opulence. They have no consideration for God, or for God's energies, and they'll do anything for sense gratification.
Atheistic fools and rascals who are very much proud of wealth fail to see things as they are. Therefore, returning them to poverty is the proper ointment for their eyes, so they may see things as they are. At least a poverty-stricken man can realize how painful poverty is, and therefore he will not want others to be in painful condition like his own. Srimad Bhagavatam 10:10-30.
So these are the 10,000 kings that were imprisoned by Jarasandha, because he planned to sacrifice them to Kala Bhairava, to become an even more powerful demoniac king, Jarasandha. And they sent a representative to Krishna in Dwarka, explaining to Krishna that previously they were very foolish, puffed up kings, engaging in so many animal sacrifices and trying to defeat their neighbors, killing so many people just so that they could increase their own glory, and meat eating, infatuation with women, all of the things that a king becomes illusioned by in their opulent position. But now they were the prisoners of Jarasandha, and there was no chance of their escape. And they lived in such abominable condition, 10,000 people locked in caves. And they described that there were mountains and mountains of stool from these 10,000 men. And the air was abominable, they were starving. And in this impoverished and hopeless condition, then they remembered the Supreme Lord. Not when they were kings, enjoying, but when everything was taken away from them. Then they took shelter of the Supreme Lord and sent a representative to Dwarka, begging the Lord to please release them, liberate them from their own karma, because they knew that this was all a reaction of their karma of not worshipping the Lord previously. So then the Lord came and he delivered them.
Even today, if a man who was formerly poverty-stricken gets money, he is inclined to utilize his money to perform many philanthropic activities, like opening schools for uneducated men and hospitals for the deceased. In this connection, there is an instructive story called Punarmushiko Bhava. again become a mouse. A mouse was very much harassed by a cat, and therefore the mouse approached a saintly person to request to become a cat. When the mouse became a cat, he was harassed by a dog, and when he became a dog, he was harassed by a tiger. But when he became a tiger, he stared at saintly person, and when the saintly person asked him, "What do you want?" Tiger said, "I want to eat you." Then the saintly person cursed him, saying, "May you again become a mouse." Purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 10.10.13.
So this is what happens in the material world. And Prabhupada even gave this example for some of his disciples. When they become very famous, great kirtan leaders, big sannyasis, then they start to think, well, now I want to become the acharya also. So again become a mouse. That's what happens. So we have to always remain the most humble servant of our spiritual master. Better to be in a mouse condition than to think of enjoying the opulences of the spiritual master. What are those opulences? Those opulences are so many temples, so many followers, so many books. They all belong to the spiritual master, and we're just the little mouse servants trying to assist him.
A similar thing is going on all over the universe. One is going up and down, sometimes becoming a mouse, sometimes a tiger, and so on. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagyavana Jiva Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bija. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 19.151. The living entities are promoted and degraded by the laws of nature. But if one is very, very fortunate, by association with saintly persons, he gets the seed of devotional service and his life becomes successful. Narada Muni wanted to bring Nalakuvar and Manigrav to the platform of devotional service through poverty, and thus he cursed them. Such is the mercy of a Vaishnava. Unless one is brought to the Vaishnava platform, he cannot be a good man. Harava bhaktasya kuto mahatgunaha. Srimad Bhagavatam 5.18.12. And a Vaishnava never becomes a good man, however severely he is punished. Purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 10.10.13.
Now we all know the story of Gajendra, but the story of the crocodile is not so well known. That crocodile was also suffering from a curse. And he used to be the king of the Gandharvas named Huhu. And King Huhu, just as we hear about Nalakuvara and Manigriva, being very puffed up, he was enjoying one day, just like the two brothers, in a beautiful lake with lotus flowers, with so many beautiful young girls. And he went under the water and he pulled what he thought was one of the legs of one of the young girls. But it turned out to be the leg of a rishi named Devala Rishi, who was also in the lake. So Devala Rishi, for his own good, he cursed him. Because what does a crocodile do? He pulls legs, right? Like he pulled Gajendra's leg. So he cursed him to become a crocodile. And then, when Vishnu came and with his Sudarshan chakra killed this crocodile, from the crocodile appeared Huhu, King Huhu again. And he told his story to Vishnu, although of course Vishnu already knew. But this is for our enlightenment. That we might be elevated to a very opulent situation. But if we don't take proper advantage by using that situation to serve the Supreme Lord, there's a good chance we might commit offense to a Vaishnava. And then we fall down. So just like Maharaj Huhu, just like Nalakuvara and Manigriva, they were cursed to take ignorant bodies until the Supreme Lord personally liberated them. Excuse me? Gajendra? Yes, Gajendra, he was also a king. He was Indradumna Maharaj. Indradumna Maharaj. He was a very great Vaishnava. He was the king who brought forth Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra. And when it was time for him to retire, he went to the ashram in he was the king of Pandya. He went to an ashram to perform austerities, and he was in deep meditation one day when Agastya Muni came. And he was thinking of the Supreme Lord, Indradumna Maharaj, so deeply that he didn't notice that the Muni had come. So Agastya Muni said, "You're so dull and ignorant. You should become an elephant." So he was cursed to become an elephant. Maharaj Indradumna, he accepted that curse, being a pure devotee. And as Gajendra, he was blessed that he was able to remember the prayers that he used to offer to the Supreme Lord. So while he was enjoying with his she-elephants in the same lake, this crocodile attacked him. And for 1,000 years, you see his wives over there in the corner? Nobody could protect him. Nobody could help him. 1,000 years, yes, 1,000 celestial years. He and the crocodile fought. And because the crocodile is stronger in the water, the crocodile kept pulling him deeper into the water. So finally, Gajendra remembered the prayers. He picked up the lotus, offered it to Krishna, and started to chant prayers to him. So then immediately the Lord came and killed the crocodile.
A person who has a pinprick in his body does not wish others to be pricked by pins. A considerate man in this life of poverty does not wish others to be also put into that condition. Krishna Book Chapter 10. By seeing their faces, one whose body has been pricked by pins can understand the pain of others who are pin-pricked. Realizing that this pain is the same for everyone, he does not want others to suffer in this way. But one who has never been pricked by pins cannot understand this pain. Srimad Bhagavatam 10:10-14.
So just today, Maitreya Prabhu, he gave this class about Ranti Dev. He had been fasting for 48 days from food and water. He was practically at the verge of death when his servants brought him some nicely prepared food and a glass of water to drink. So he distributed that food to his family members, and then one by one the demigods tested him. First a Brahmin came, then a Sudra came, finally a Chandala came. He had given away all of his food. He only had one glass of water left to drink because his thirst he was dying from thirst. And then the Chandala with his dogs, he said, "I'm so thirsty. I'm dying of thirst. Please give me some water to drink." So then when Ranti Dev gave that last glass of water to the Chandala, immediately, because he understood what thirst was, what that pain of thirst was, so he gave that water to the Chandala. And then he said by giving that water, all of his thirst and hunger was immediately vanished. Because that was by the grace of the Lord, because he was able to be so merciful to others, because he understood what hunger and thirst felt like. So therefore, out of compassion, he was able to give to them. And then the Lord blessed him by taking away all of his hunger and thirst.
Generally, it is seen that one who has risen from a poverty-stricken life and becomes wealthy creates some charitable institution at the end of his life so that other poverty-stricken men might be benefited. In short, a compassionate poor man may consider others' pains and pleasures with empathy. Poor man may be seldom puffed up with false pride, and he may be freed from all kinds of infatuation. He may remain satisfied by whatever he gets for its maintenance by the grace of the Lord. Krishna Book Chapter 10.
So when Krishna and Balaram received second initiation from Garga Muni and accepted the brahmacharya vrat, it was time for them to go to Gurukula. And they didn't want to go to Gurukula in Mathura because they were afraid if their family members saw them And if Nanda and Yashoda heard about that they had accepted brahmacharya, it would increase their pain. So they secretly walked all the way to Ujjain, Avantipura, where the son of Purnamasi lived, Sandipani Muni, and they entered his Gurukula for 64 days. And acting as brahmacharis, as humble servants to their guru, there were other children in the Gurukula. And one of them was a Brahmin named Sudama Vipra. And you'll find that several of Krishna's associates outside of Vrindavan have similar names to his friends inside of Vrindavan. There's Arjuna Gopa, there's Sudama Gopa. So outside also there's Arjun, his friend, and there's also Sudama, his friend, Sudama Vipra. So they became very close friends. One night there was going to be a big storm, so the Guru Mata told them, quickly go get some wood from the forest so we can do the yagya in the morning. So they went into the forest, and suddenly the storm started, and they couldn't find their way back. It was so dark. So they spent the whole night hugging each other to stay warm from the cold rains. And then in the morning, Sandipani Muni came looking for them, and he blessed them both. So they were very dear friends. Then later, Sudama, he went back to his home. Krishna went back to Mathura. And Sudama Vipra, he was such a self-satisfied Brahmin, he never attempted to get anything for the maintenance of himself or his family. And his wife and children, they were always hungry for that reason. So his wife heard that he and Krishna were classmates, and she asked Sudama, why don't you just go and ask Krishna to help with your economic situation? So just to please her, he went, and he didn't have anything, but she went begging to her neighbors for some gift to bring to Krishna. They had some old chidwa. They wrapped it in a cloth, the corner of his dhoti, and he set off for Dwarka. In Dwarka, when he was received by Krishna, he was worshipped just like the Supreme Lord. And they were so happy to see each other, just talking about old times. Finally, Krishna asked him, well, you must have brought something for me. But he was afraid to keep it, to show it to him. So forcibly, Krishna took that chidwa, and he ate some of it. And then he was going to eat some more, and Rukmini stopped him. He said, already, he's going to have more opulence than the king of heaven just by you accepting that little bit of chidwa. You don't have to eat anymore, because she's the goddess of fortune. So they were so happy to see each other that Sudama forgot to say anything to Krishna about his economic situation. And on the way home, he remembered. So when he got to his house, he couldn't recognize his house, because Krishna had turned it into an opulent, beautiful, heavenly palace with servants and maidservants and animals and gold and ornaments, and his wife was beautifully dressed. But when Sudama entered the house, he, as a Brahmin, lived just as simply as before. He was in no way infatuated with all the opulence that Krishna had awarded his family with. So that's the mood of a devotee. And Prabhupada lived the same way. Wherever he was treated so grandly, but he lived so simply as a person, just living out of a suitcase. One suitcase he would travel all over the world with.
There is a saying, the happiness of wealth is enjoyable by a person who has tasted the distress of poverty. There is also another common saying, Vandhya ki bujibe prasava vedana. A woman who has not given birth to a child cannot understand the pain of childbirth. Unless one comes to the platform of actual experience, one cannot realize what is pain and what is happiness in this material world. The laws of nature act accordingly. If one has killed an animal, one must himself be killed by that same animal. This is called Mamsa. Mam means me, so means he. As I am eating an animal, that animal will have the opportunity to eat me. In every state, Therefore, it is ordinarily the custom that if a person commits murder, he is hanged. Report to Srimad Bhagavatam 10:10-14.
So this is the personification of material energy, Kali. Very angry mood at all the demons who are committing so many sinful activities. And it is to Kali that the meat eaters sacrifice the animals. It's just horrific. We didn't want to show pictures of this animal sacrifice. Heartbreaking. How mercilessly they kill the animals. But Kali is watching all of this. And just as when the dacoits wanted to sacrifice Jadbharat, why do they want to sacrifice him? Because the leader of the dacoits wanted to have a son. And in their foolishness, in their ignorance, they thought, if I offer a man to Kali, then she'll give me a son in return. So these fools, there are rules and regulations in the different portions of the Vedas for offering meat to the Lord, offering animals, these balis, the Pashu Bali and Purusha Bali. But when you're offering the animal, it has to be on an Amavasya night in the dark so no one can see. And you have to whisper into the animal's ear a mantra. And that mantra says that now I'm going to eat you, and next lifetime you'll eat me. And that's the meaning of the word mangsa. Mam, sa, me, he. Now I'll eat you, and the next lifetime you'll eat me. So Kali, in her anger, she kills all of these demons. And then the reaction is that they don't get liberation when she kills them. When Krishna kills someone, the demons, they get liberated. But not these demons. No, they have to suffer for all of their sinful activities.
To remain in a poverty-stricken condition is a kind of austerity. According to Vedic culture, therefore, the Brahmanas, as a matter of routine, keep themselves in a poverty-stricken condition to save themselves from the false prestige of material opulence. False prestige due to advancement of material prosperity is a great impediment for spiritual emancipation. A poverty-stricken man cannot become unnaturally fat by eating more and more. And on account of not being able to eat more than he requires, his senses are not very turbulent. When the senses are not very turbulent, he cannot become violent. Krishna Book, Chapter 10.
So the two brothers, Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, they were born in Brahmin families, but because of bad association and accepting service in the Muslim government, they were ostracized by the Brahmin community. And they lived very aristocratic, opulent lives. One was the finance minister, the other was the chief minister, prime minister of the Shah. But when they met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and surrendered to him, they gave up everything and accepted simple loincloths and a tattered quilt. And they didn't even have any place of residence. They would live under trees each night and simply chant the holy names and write literature about the process of devotional service. So this was voluntary. Nor did they cook. They would do what's called madhukari. Madhukari means like the bumblebee. They go from flower to flower to get some honey, madhu. So the austerity of the sannyasis is that they go from door to door, and whatever they receive, that's what they eat. So it's impossible to become fat in such unless you're cheating. But they wouldn't cheat. Sanatana Goswami, he would only accept some atta. And he would take that atta and roll it into balls and throw it into a fire and make bhatti and offer those bhatti to Madan Mohan. And one day Madan Mohan, he said to him, can you give me a little salt at least? And Sanatana Goswami, he started to cry. He said, today you're asking for salt. Who knows what you'll ask for tomorrow? I told you before, I'm a Babaji. This is all I can give you. Please accept. And he was crying. So then Madan Gopal, he made a different arrangement. He had a whole shipload of salt stopped right at the bottom of the hill where he was hanging from a tree. You see here this Dvadasa Ditya Tila that the Madan Mohan temple is situated on. That's where the boat was lodged. So when he wants something, he gets it in big quantity. He got a whole boat of salt. And Sanatana Goswami could understand that this was Madan Gopal's tricks. So the Goswamis, they didn't aspire for any type of opulence. They had everything. They already knew there was no happiness in that. They simply, whatever the Lord, because the Lord's in everyone's heart, whatever the Lord provided, they were very happy with. We'll continue tomorrow. Hare Krishna.